It's hot takes time, baby. I'm taking a real risk doing this hot takes video with a man bun in. It's going to absolutely ruin the side profile gag that I do here, but you guys have some hot takes and they deserve to be heard. Game was better with old Chavez. I'm tempted to agree with this on the grounds that old Chavez let decks that were 11 cards effectively succeed more, which inherently sort of increased diversity in terms of deck types. However, it seems like if it were me at second dinner, old Chavez was kind of a proposition that would never exist for an extended period of time. It's the kind of card you have early in the game when you are not making as many cards, and now that they're making, 5, 6 cards some months, right? They are going to need that deck slot in order to make those new cards exciting. So in a way, I would say Chavez is a crutch for early game design. And now that they have a better understanding of it, they can release cards that are more exciting than Chavez in the decks that you'd be running her in. So as an example, I would look at Destroy, where Chavez was a key card in that deck before X-23 came out, before Nico Minoru came out. And it's like now, if we had Nico and X-23 in that deck, I don't think we'd be running Chavez. And I think that should be the goal for basically every other deck that had Chavez in it, is they need to have an exciting X-23 type card in there. Most people who complain about Leech never anticipate or play around him when facing Darkhawk or Shinnot. I think this is a take I disagree with. I think you can disagree with Leech's existence without it being a skill issue type of thing. I do think that, there is some degree to which, like, anytime anyone hates a card that beats them, it's because it beats them. And sometimes it beats them because of a skill issue. I get that. Like, that's me with Hela to some degree. But even once I got how to deal with Hela, how to deal with Leech, there's still just these sort of fundamentally unfun cards in a way I would argue is inherent to them, which is they are cards that very commonly invalidate your opponent's deck in a very difficult to deal with kind of way once it happens. You don't feel like you had a ton of control over it, although I will say in both cases you do, because in Marvel Snap you always have control over whether you want to stay for the end of the game, all things like that. But I think Leech specifically is a card that it just sort of makes people go, oh, that sucks. I don't enjoy that. And I don't necessarily think it's a skill issue. Oh, you lost to Leech, you deserve it. Because, I don't think Leech is actually a very good card right now. But I do understand how he could create negative feelings in the sense of, oh, I just got this, cool-ass 6-drop. I just got this null. I can't wait to play it. And even when you beat a Leech, it's not by doing the thing you wanted to do, usually. It's by, doing something much more mundane. And I think that's Leech's ultimate crime, is that he makes games of Marvel Snap that could be incredibly exciting into very mundane affairs. And I don't necessarily think it's like a power level issue with him. It's just boy, this guy is super mid-feeling. And it's not something that, is an issue of skill here, in my opinion. The recent Loki transform change was cheap and bugs me. It felt like they did the equivalent of Morbius gets +2 power for every card discarded, except by MODOK. I agree with you. I think the Loki change actually was cheap. It actually is just all right, well, it doesn't work with the collector anymore. You happy yet? Is this no longer the best card in the game yet? Are you happy? Are you happy with that yet? And, I am happy with it. But yeah, it does feel a little bit like brute force design, where it's okay, what we have done here is we made Loki worse in the most brute force way possible without actually having to deal with him, the implications of the card itself. We just dealt with the things that worked with him the best. And I don't necessarily think that's an improper way to go about it, but I do think that in a world where so many other cards are getting dealt with directly, it does make people wonder, damn, why won't they just do it with Loki? And I think the answer for Loki is that the knobs on him are not easy to turn. You either start getting rid of his power in very absolute terms, like you like get rid of the fact that he discounts and that just makes him terrible, or you get rid of some of his stats and that just makes him like more polarized, but not necessarily all that much worse when you actually do the thing you want him to do. And so you end up in these situations where the knobs on the actual card aren't very easy to turn. And sometimes the easiest thing you can do, and maybe the best solution, is just to turn the knobs on the stuff around it. So I think people look at Loki and they're like, why didn't they do anything about this for so long? And the answer is, I think that it's just very hard to deal with a card like that without making it completely terrible. And I think doing what they did with the Collector is a significant change to it, but not one that makes it completely terrible, which is good. They should avoid making cards completely terrible when they nerf them. Okay, so this one has like multiple parts. This person posted, crybabies are ruining the game. And I was like, well, okay. I mean, like that's pretty vague. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And so they came back with the people that complain about some cards and then they end up nerfing them. And I think that this sort of gets causality reversed on that. I think that for the most part, Second Dinner doesn't nerf stuff because people complain about it. Second Dinner nerfs stuff that people complain about because the people complaining about it correctly picked up on the fact that it was too good. Like it's a sort of, the correlation is not pointing the way you think there. It's one of those things where people tend to complain the most, right, about things that beat them, sure. And if a bunch of people are saying, wow, this thing beats my ass all the time, usually that thing actually will end up being a balanced outlier. I can think of maybe 4 cards that are nerfable on the basis of how bad they feel, and basically every other nerf they've done is, this is actually a balance outlier. Basically, I think that this would require Second Dinner to be, I would say, dumber than they have been demonstrated to be. And what I mean by that is, like, nobody was complaining about Destroy, and they were like, we need to nerf Destroy, which means, like, they're looking at numbers on the back end. They're not looking at player sentiment, really. It's just like, this is how we're dealing. If they were looking at player sentiment, they would have nuked Loki off the face of the planet. They're clearly not looking at that to the degree that this would require the causality to be going the direction this person implies. So I feel like generally card gamers are actually really good at noticing what's broken and really bad at fixing it, right? Like, if you asked me to, like, fix Leech and make it fun, I would have no idea what to do. But I can tell you that it's not fun. Or same with Hela, right? It's like that's a card I famously dislike playing against, right? It's like, haha, this is Cam's most hated card, right? But if you asked me how to fix it, I would have no idea, and that's why I don't work for Second Dinner. Like, I think that this is a take that reverses causality, and generally card gamers are actually pretty good at identifying what the problem is, like, en masse, and not as good as identifying how to fix it. But basically, this is a little bit backwards, I think. People cry about stuff that gets nerfed, usually because that stuff deserves to get nerfed. Hela, like Tribunal, are fun cards until they find super efficient and consistent versions, and that's when things are no longer fun. I think it's not just Hela and Tribunal that fall into this. It's like Mr. Negative, it's like Phoenix Force, it's like Galactus. And the thing these decks all really have in common is not necessarily being combo decks, per se, because I think you could argue that decks like Destroy and Thanos are combo decks, but being combo decks that are sort of unapproachable and non-interactive when they pull off what they're trying to do, right? It's just sort of one of the effects these decks tend to have on the actual gameplay of Marvel Snap is they make a lot of the card game parts of it not really matter. They sort of go out of their way to make a game that is about playing on 3 locations and your positioning mattering and targeting specifically. They sort of say, actually, none of that matters at all. That's what those decks tend to have in common. Is it's like, none of the actual parts of the game matter. Only what I'm doing matters. And I think, you know, to a lesser degree, you could argue that a deck like Sarah is the sort of reverse of this, where it's like this very interactive thing, but it's attempting to accomplish the same goal, which is to say, none of what you did matters because it's gone now. And so, like, I totally understand why that's, like, a thing people dislike. Like, with Loki, it's like, none of what you did matters because I'm doing it better. That totally makes sense, but decks like Sarah and Loki still have to play the game Marvel Snap, right? They still have to be like, I'm going to target these locations, and I'm going to attempt to use these cards to swing those locations and win 2 out of 3. Whereas a deck like Living Tribunal is like, I'm going to put 9,000 points on the board. Do you have the answer? Or a deck like Hela is like, I'm going to roll several sets of dice. If enough of them come up with the right numbers, I win. And if enough of them don't, you win. And a deck like Galactus, when Galactus was good, is like, well, I'm going to play this card. Are you going to be able to counter it? If you are not, you are dead. If you do, well, congratulations on guessing the 50-50 on where the Cosmo goes correctly. Like, it's a very stripped down experience. And I think when people talk about why these decks tend to be problematic, the thing they converge on is they are not decks that play the game by the rules. And I think that that is a thing that is okay to exist. But when it becomes the dominant mode of play, as this person suggests, it does sort of get not necessarily monotonous, but it just sort of feels like the games become less dynamic and much more about cube management, which is, like, fine, but probably not what a lot of people signed up for when they went to play a card game. Leech keeps the 70-card tech deck from being as strong as it already is, and that's good. I feel like this commenter actually kind of nailed something, maybe a little bit accidentally, but Leech actually doesn't keep it from being as strong as it currently is. That's kind of the issue with Leech, right? Where it's like, yeah, no, Leech sucks, and if Leech sucked and did his job, I probably wouldn't have an issue with him. But we were just in a meta that was full of Hela and Sarah, and Leech was not good. And I think that's my main issue with Leech, where it's like, okay, so Leech is supposed to solve this specific problem, and if he is a miserable experience, it's worth it for the specific problem getting solved. That's the pitch, right? Except he doesn't solve that problem. And he's really only being used in Thanos decks where, honestly, I think he's subpar, where you're playing Thanos and you're playing Leech in it so your opponent can't Shang-Chi your stuff. And it's like, oh, you're not using him to do the thing that you're supposed to be doing here. You're using him to prevent your opponent from interacting with your unfair stuff. Like, that's what Leech is getting used for. He's getting used to prevent interaction, not to, like, prevent turn 6 explosions. And he's not doing a very good job at preventing turn 6 explosions. He's terrible at that. So I think the issue with Leech is that the promise of the card, in terms of being a safety valve, has been broken. We're in a Hela Sarah meta, and he sucks. Like, he's clearly not doing his job. Again, this is one of those things, though, where card gamers are good at identifying the problem. I've identified the problem that he's not doing his job. But if you came to me and you were like, hey, KM, you got any ideas to fix Leech? I would be like, absolutely not. I have none. I am not qualified to give an answer on that. I'm sorry. The Balance team is doing great work. The change to Blob was very well thought out, keeping the card playable, strong, but not game-breaking. A Nihilist nerf seemed exaggerated at the time, but it turns out he's still very much present. Maybe they should run the economy too. I think that this is, a little much, right? Because when you think about what the Balance team has done, they definitely, like, obliterated Werewolf by Night. They definitely, like, obliterated Elsa. I do still wish that those cards did not get obliterated. Yes, I do think they've been significantly better post those changes in terms of keeping cards alive. But the original Mobius change, Werewolf, Elsa, those are cases that I think actually did sort of damage my trust that these cards that I pick up are going to be, worth actually picking up in a consistent way. And I think the less of those that happen, the better, basically. Like, right now, they've only done it a couple times, and I'd really appreciate it if they never do it again. And the Blob change, it was great. The Miss Marvel change, again, great. Like, they're doing a great job in terms of keeping the souls of these cards alive, making them still good and playable, and not making them very, very stupid. Excellent job. Totally agree with that. Now, the second thing that this comment gets at is that, the Balance team and the monetization team are not the same. And I think that is something that more people should probably internalize, because They tend to think of Second Dinner as like a monolith where, you know, like there's this vast coordinated network throughout Second Dinner that's like, aha, let's buff Gladiator so that people get screwed over when they didn't buy him. And it's like, no, it's really not what's happening. If anything, it's an indication of lack of coordination between the balance team and the team that does monetization. Because what I see happening consistently is the balance team seems to have made a commitment that when they release a card in a spotlight that is good, they're willing to tone it down. And when they release a card in a spotlight that is bad, they're willing to tune it up. Lady Deathstrike, Black Knight, Gladiator. And these are actually the kind of decisions that need to be synergized with the monetization team. Because it's like, okay, we just buffed Gladiator, and now we make no money on it because nobody can buy the card. Because it's not in the spotlights, right? Like, how are you supposed to acquire the card? You just buffed this card, you should be selling it. And it does sort of feel like they need more coordination between people doing spotlights and people doing balance in such a way that, like, you know, get like a liaison on it who can be like, yo, can we bump this spotlight up? We're planning on buffing Gladiator. Can we bump him up a week or something? Like that just seems like a kind of thing that would be very, very helpful to have like some sort of like holistic coordinator for, like, I guess you'd call it overall game experience, where it's like, this is how the players that play your game are experiencing it, regardless of how it's going on behind the scenes. Players who play your game are unable to spend their new resources on a card that you just buffed. And I feel like that seems like maybe it's leaving money on the table. My God, we have another Leech take. Okay, Leech is both balanced and good for the game. It is the only reliable answer to this huge 6-turn point deck. Blech. This huge turn 6 points dump deck like Hela, and is limiting enough to only be able to go into extremely specific decks. I agree with this take if it were true, where it's like, you know, that is the promise of Leech, but Leech is actually not very good at dealing with Hela right now. Like, Hela, between Jubilee and Lockjaw, actually has plenty of ways to go get that Hela. And if they don't have it in their hand, you just like kind of lose if they did like a Black Knight thing and you play a Giganto because Leech needs to be played from ahead. I think the actual issue with Leech is more in the second part of the sentence, where they're like, if this card needs to be played in specific decks, because I don't think there are any specific decks that can really afford to play Leech. There are decks that can afford to play Leech, but they're probably better without it. Like, I personally think that Thanos is a better deck without Leech right now. And like, Sheenaut is going to be fine playing Leech because Sheenaut is a deck that plays Leech defensively rather than offensively, so it gets to free roll the offensive uses of Leech. But I personally do think that there needs to be some other safety valve for these kind of decks, because right now, when you look at them, it's like, all right, there's Leech, and then what else am I supposed to do? Nothing? Because Leech isn't doing his job. I'd really like if there was someone doing Leech's job. This comment also had a second part. Also, Bussy Pounder is your best commenter on YouTube. Influencers with thousands following their content should not be shaming others for playing a deck, calling it stupid or mindless. I'm talking about Hela and your dismissive attitude in recent videos. A deck should be allowed to be good, even if you don't like that deck. So this comment confused the hell out of me, because as far as I'm aware, I have never once shamed the users of a deck. As far as I'm aware. Like, if you want to look at me doing banter with a friend in the Husky Puppies video and then take that personally, that's one thing. I guess I can apologize for that. But I feel like I've been explicitly clear. Like, when I did a video about Hela, it was, I personally hate this, but I am putting it on my channel because I think it's a good idea for you to play this deck. I am never, ever, ever going to shame a person for their deck choice. Whatever you choose to play is you attempting to win the most cubes. There's nothing wrong with that. And I feel like I've actually been pretty clear about that. There is nothing wrong with you choosing to play the best thing for your cubes. When I talk about what I don't like about Hela, when I talk about the gameplay patterns it creates, that does not implicate you in those. That is not a critique of you for choosing to play the deck. That is a critique of the deck existing. Something that's been pointed out to me a lot recently is, like, Hela is actually a really good Series 3 deck. That's super cool. Like, that's good. It's good for the game that exists. It sucks that it's Hela. Like, this is, I want to draw a clear line, because it seems that although I've thought I was drawing a clear line, that clear line has not been drawn. And I want to be 100% clear when I say this. When I criticize a card, I'm not criticizing the people who play it. It's not the same thing. I don't like a card, but I'm not going to be like, oh, Hela. It's a Hela. Oh my God, this guy sucks at Marvel Snap. Like, I've never, ever, ever. I will say a card has, like, bad vibes before I say something like that. Like, this is, yeah. And then the last part of this is, just because you don't like a deck doesn't mean it shouldn't be allowed to be good. I mean, no shit. Like, yeah, just because I don't like some, I'm not second dinner. I don't get to do this. Like, yeah, I'm a YouTuber. I'm giving my opinion on whether I like a thing or not. That's not the same as me controlling the balance levers of the card. And frankly, I wouldn't have the first idea how to nerf this card. Like, Hela's another one of those cards where it's like, in the world where second dinner comes to me, it's like, KM, we value your opinion so much. We really want you to nerf Hela. We know you're the biggest Hela hater on earth. I would have no idea where to start. I'd have no idea. I am not good at that. And I guess I just want to be 100% clear, just in case I wasn't clear earlier. I put this shit on my channel. I did a Hela deck, despite it being one of my least favorite archetypes in the game. It emphasizes all the things I don't like, because I want you to play it. Like, that's why it's on the channel. That's why it's on my tier list. I want you to play it if it is your best option to play. If I didn't want you to play it, I would not be putting it there. I want you to win as many games as you possibly can. I want you to win as many cubes as you possibly can. I don't care how you do it. I want that for you. That's why that stuff exists. And whether or not a deck is my favorite or not, you should see that Hela video as demonstrative of the fact that it doesn't matter how much I like the deck. I can hate it. But if it's the right thing for you to climb with at the moment, I will put that shit on my channel. And I will go out there and I will find someone who is an expert at that deck so you can get better at it faster. That's what I do. And I guess I don't know where the wires got crossed here, because I feel like I've been super clear that everything this person said is true. Absolutely, you should not shame people for their deck choice. That is one of the dumbest things on earth. Absolutely, just because I don't like a deck doesn't mean that it shouldn't exist. 100%. Absolutely. I'm confused where the opposite impression came from. That's where I'm at. Like, it feels weird to get this as critique when I agree with it 100%, which means I must not have been clear in my own communication. That's on me. So I apologize if anyone who's been playing Hela is out there like, wow, Cam fucking hates me for playing this deck. That's not how it is. I don't like the deck, but it's hardly the fault of the people playing it. It's the fault of the deck for existing. Like, it's not something that is... there's no deck you could play that would make me judge you for playing it. That's not how it works. You play what you want to play because it's a game. And generally, when you're on my channel, you play what the best option is because you want to win the game. I'm not going to get mad at you for doing it. Like, if I'm on stream, I might be like, oh, fucking Hela again. But that's not your fault. Like, it's not like you, the person playing against me, is at fault for choosing Hela. It was a good decision. That's why it's on my tier list. That's why I did a video on it. It sucks, but I'm not stupid. So, yeah, I don't know where the wires got crossed here. I'm sorry if my... sometimes I feel like I hyperbolize things to a degree that, like, it ends up feeling much worse than I mean it. And I apologize if that's what happened in the case of Hela. To all the Hela players, like, I'm sorry. I don't judge you. I just don't like the deck. You're totally fine. Like, I don't... It's definitely not personal, and I'm sorry if you thought that it was. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for submitting your questions, critiques, comments for this episode of Snap Takes, Snap Hot Takes, Stephen A. Snappin', Snappin' A. Smith, Snap Bayless, whatever you really want to call this series. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I have been KM Best. You have been phenomenal. As always, I will see you in the next one.